When we say international trade, we refer to the exchange of capital, goods and services across international borders and territories. In most countries, such trade represents a significant share of gross domestic product. While international trade has been present throughout much of the history, we can say that it's mostly in last centuries and maybe after, in the early decades of 21st century, now we can talk about a real important share of trade in economic policy, trading actors becoming important political actors, political agents in international relations, so they've become even more important. But we know that historically also there were some rules such as the Silk Road, for instance, which is important for Turkey, for the Ottoman Empire. So these roads were already we have, but now thanks to developing technologies, the effects of globalization, now it's easier to produce something and sell it to a faraway land. Okay, in the past, as you can easily guess, it was difficult because we didn't have maybe such transportation, such communication facilities. But now you can produce something from Africa and you can sell it to South America, Asia, Europe, North America, it doesn't matter, to Australia. You can do all thanks to technology. That's why technology, in a sense, improves trade, and it can help us to have development over the trade. While the rising international trade strengthens globalization, globalization also looks for increasing international trade to surpass national boundaries. So globalization as an idea, okay? We have to surpass these national boundaries. We have to think beyond national boundaries because it makes us sometimes attach too much to some values, and we may not be able of solving some problems if we are too much attached to these national boundaries, national thinking. That's why globalization looks for even more international trade, and international trade strengthens globalization. So there's a kind of symbiotic relationship between these two. That's why globalization, pro-globalization thinkers and international trade capital holders, they may support, most of them support each other. For many thinkers, the management of economics has become even more important in many countries than the management of politics in the recent years. So, in the past, let me read you Mao's, the founder of modern People's Republic of China, had a very important dictum, Mao saying, which was about politics take command. Politics takes command. So it was, Mao was underlining the importance of politics over the economics. But now in today's world, in 21st century, even in China, who has become liberalized in the recent years, we can talk about economics take command. Okay, sometimes in our world, economic rationale, economic mentality may surpass political boundaries, political thinking. That's why economics have become even more important. That's why we have to look maybe from this perspective, and it doesn't only apply to liberal or rightist ideologies. It doesn't necessarily mean it belongs to liberalism or right. It can contain all ideologies. You can have a more leftist oriented ideology. This doesn't prevent you to make trade, but maybe the revenue that you get after the trade, you may use this more for your purposes, your political ideology, but it doesn't prevent trade. While the supremacy of economic mentality over political mentality create problems related to social justice, in some cases it could help political problems to be resolved due to increasing economic integration and on problematic sides, which could create win-win situation. Okay, we'll talk about this win-win concept today. I think it's important to understand the current nature of international relations, because normally in politics we think that there is win-loss. Two countries get into war, one side wins, the other loses. So there's a win-loss. Or in matches we talk about win-loss. Okay, Chelsea plays against Galatasaray, so Chelsea wins, Galatasaray wins. One side wins, the other side is lost. So in economics it may not be the case, and also in politics now in our current world. Why? Because two sides, both sides, all sides can also win up to some degree in some situations. And we call these situations as win-win situations. A win-win game is a game which is designed in a way that all participants can profit from it in one way or the other. In conflict resolution, a win-win strategy is a conflict resolution process that aims to accommodate all disputants. So it will help all disputants win-win side to have advantage. In international relations too, integration theories open the door for win-win situations. So it's not only in economics. When we make trade, I sell something, you buy something, you buy what you need, and I sell and earn money. So both sides win. We can maybe think of the very same thing in international relation theories too. So new integration theories open the way for these win-win situations. According to Reinhard Myers, integration requires the emergence of common norms, values, and targets with the opposing side. There are different theories about integration, which I want to summarize it for you in short. The first model or theory about integration is called functionalism, and it was the basic idea behind European integration. As it was advocated first by David Mitrany in 1943 book, A Working Peace System, integration should start from economics, since creating win-win situation is much more difficult in politics. However, if we can create this economic integration and create win-win situations, then political integration, social integration, cultural integration, this could be followed after the economic integration. And in fact, it was the idea behind European Coal and Steel Committee in 1951 with Paris Treaty. In the post-war period, European countries came together, 6 European countries, Germany, France, Benelux countries, and Italy. They came together, these 6 countries, and signed this Paris Treaty to establish European Coal and Steel Community to organize such a system which will later turn into what we know as European Union, a supranational body over the nation states. So, of course, this is a maybe successful model in the European Union, at least for the moment, but we'll have much more to come. Think of the South American countries, Mercosur. It's an economic integration organization which could later turn into also a political body, political entity. Or Russian Federation has announced to establish this Eurasian Union in 2015, which is another important organization as a bloc. So the 21st century can be, as I said before, can be the century of unions. That's why we have African Union, for instance. I'm not sure, but maybe there are also studies, research, and political incentives to make African Union into a more maybe working and integrationist organization. So these unions can work for the sake of people and help each other to have, of course, better political atmosphere. The second model is called transactionalism. Transactionalism was developed by Karl Deutsch in the 1950s. Deutsch believed that integration could be achieved best by managing communication on different sides by establishing a common language and culture. So we also call this model as communication theory, communication school, because it focuses, rather than the economic integration, more on the communication. So people will understand each other if they think of the same concept when they use it. Okay, that's why if we can create. I will later try to exemplify this by Cyprus Dispute, Cyprus example. If we create a common language, a common culture, then it will be easy for us to solve our problems. Why? Because then we'll have similar shared values, so that we'll look to problems from the very same perspective. our solution will be maybe closer, similar. That's why transactionalism is focusing more on language, communication skills rather than the economic rationale. The third model of integration is what we call intergovernmentalism, and this is created by Andrew Moravcsik. This is rather than economic integration or communication. This model focuses on the government's relation to each other. So they are looks for a skillful governments, capable governments that could create integration by managing it, politically managing it. So it focuses more on these governments and governmental actors, state actors. The fourth model, on the other hand, is called what we call supranationalism. Supranationalism, as you know, we use the term supranational over bodies. It's not, it's bigger than international. International means between nations, between states. But supranational is above nation states. So EU maybe could fit into this supranational model. And when we talk about supranationalism, we can talk about two different theories, two different ways of doing it. Institutionalism is one way, and it's based on the creation of supranational actors having more power than national actors. The other way is called socialization, and it's based on the changing identities and the emergence of new supranational identities during the integration process. So if you want to create a supranational body over two supranational, you want to realize integration through supranationalism, what you can do in the first institutionalist model is to create a supranational body to organize such integration process. And the second way is to create supranational identities that surpass these identities. For instance, the identity of European identity, which surpasses all other identities, French, German. These kinds of identities can be used for EU integration, for European integration, or maybe for the African integration. We can use the term Africa. Okay, so maybe over the national boundaries, we can think of these identities that could help integration to take place. Now I want to talk about Cyprus. Maybe it's not necessarily, we're closer to Africa, we're close to Africa, but we're in the Mediterranean, so maybe we can talk about Mediterranean Union as a case study, and Eastern Mediterranean resources as a new phenomenon that could help for resolution and agreement in Cyprus. So let's start. I think since you are here, you know the history of Cyprus problem, so I'm not going to summarize this. You all know, I assume you all know. But what I want to talk about is the effect of recent discoveries of natural gas resources in Eastern Mediterranean, close to Cyprus, southern part especially, and also to Israel. And if it could help us to resolve our problems in the island and also in the region. The delivering and the safe transportation of Cyprus natural gas resources may direct two neighboring political identities, Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus and Cyprus Republic, to work together and reach a consensus for the settlement. This cooperation may be strengthened since Israel's newly discovered natural gas resources may also be transported from the same pipeline route. So I'll try to, let me first show you this map, showing the newly discovered natural gas resources, and on the left side we see Cyprus resources, and on the right side we can look at the discoveries around Israel. Since European countries are in the search of new and cheaper energy resources as well as alternatives to Russian oil and gas, an American company and the existence of an American company on the island as the principal actor of this process may also get help from the outside world. for the international public, okay? Maybe when we look at the declarations of, American President Mr. Obama and American Foreign Minister John Kerry and all other important actors, international actors, we see that there's a really high support for the agreement and settlement. So Turkey and Greece, two guarantor states, are also seen supportive of this process. So we can think of a new conjuncture, new situation which may lead to settlement and agreement. But here, what I want to bring into discussion, into light, is starting from first thing. So first thing first. Looking at European model, which was claimed to be the best model by Western political scientists and Western social scientists. So when we look at this model, we will see that the integration starts from economic integration. So it doesn't necessarily mean you can solve the political problems in one day. First, according to especially the supranational and functionalist model paradigms, we can think of economic integration which will eventually lead to political, social, cultural integration. That's why we can say that first, maybe it should be better to focus on the economic integration or to safe transportation of the natural gas resources from islands and the sharing of these resources over the island. Then this may lead to, and it will lead to maybe improvement in terms of economic relations. This will help sides to solve their problems when there is an economic relation, and when two sides are dependent on each other, then we can think of higher chances of integration, also politically and socially. Otherwise, a political integration process that wasn't really supported, that wasn't really backed up by economic integration, may, in the years to come, easily, unsuccessful. This is possible. That's why, in order to avoid heartbreaks, in order to avoid failures, maybe it's better to start from the first thing, from the economic integration. So the first thing to solve then is to solve this economic dilemma. So how to transport and how to share the resources on the island. Then, or at the same time, maybe they can discuss it. But this should be, maybe economic rationale should come first to help sides to have more confidence over each other. Then, what we can discuss, we shouldn't maybe stick ourselves, we shouldn't get stuck only in the islands, but we can talk about the whole Mediterranean. Why shouldn't we talk about a Mediterranean Union? It was later in the past, French President Sarkozy or some European leaders brought this vision to European vision, starting from this Barcelona process in 1990s, and then they created this Union for Mediterranean Union. So this integration, Mediterranean integration could also take place, and when you look at the Mediterranean, you will see that there are many problems that could be solved, that their chances to be solved will increase in the case of economic integration. We have Arab-Israeli conflict, we have Palestine issue, as you all know. We have some ethnic clash in all countries in neighboring Mediterranean. We have Cyprus Dispute, of course, and we have many other problems in the region, in the North Africa countries neighboring, Mediterranean. So maybe this sharing and later the economic integration over these countries, since as in the line of some thinkers, I assume that the 21st century will be the century of unions. In order not to be alone in the foreign policy, these countries neighboring Mediterranean may help to, integrate economically first and maybe later politically, help each other, increase the level of communication and integration for their people, so that their economies will be maybe larger and they will help each other, especially in terms of humanitarian issues. They'll be less dependent on maybe
actors that are outside of the region. So maybe they could help each other best, since they know each other, they have historically, culturally close relations. So and we can also talk about some writers like Brodel, they spend their lives over this, the Mediterranean culture. Although it seems forgotten now because we assume that there's a West and Middle East, but we have a Mediterranean, the center. So, and Mediterranean region has its own culture, believe me, maybe because of the lifestyle, people's resemblance, or the climate conditions. We can talk about such identity, which is not really revealed, which is not really well studied. That's why maybe this regional discoveries, first in Cyprus, in Israel, now they say in Crete, also in Girne, so maybe there will be more to come. Maybe these discoveries could help. Of course, these projects should be shouldn't be harmful to the environment. This is the most important condition. We should protect the environment, but in a safe way of transporting and providing these resources can help countries to have better lives, people living in these countries to have better lives. So we may think big and also design the earlier steps of Mediterranean Union also by taking help from these resources. You see the Mediterranean map, so it goes towards Europe, towards Spain. We have North African countries, Middle Eastern countries, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon. We have Turkey, Cyprus, Greece, France, these European countries, new member countries, but they can work on such a, Mediterranean is large enough for everyone. So the integration, political, economic integration first, and then political integration might come later as a consequence. But for sure, this will need regional leaders that are not only thinking beyond the patterns of maybe, national boundaries. Maybe some important actors in the region, Israel, France, Turkey, Greece, and other countries with equal degree can play the leading role in such a new geopolitical design. Main problems of such a design at the moment, of course, are Syrian civil war, of course, which creates a lot of instability in the country, instabilities in Libya and Egypt after the transitions. In Libya, it seems very unstable, and in Egypt now it's more stable, maybe after the coup, but there are problems related to, of course, democracy and human rights. Arab-Israeli conflict seems to be, of course, most enduring important problem in the region. It's not easy to solve. Turkish-Israeli tension in the last years, it's a problem, especially after the Mavi Marmara crisis. It became apparent, and Turkish-Greek disagreements, although compared to past, when I compare it, it's highly better than the past. We can say that there are still some problems, so maybe this economic dimension, this economic design and geopolitical design might help these countries. Of course, it seems too utopian, but once in Europe also, when Jean Monnet and other European leaders were thinking about a European Union, after just few years after the Second World War, people killed each other by the number of millions, 50 million people died in the Second World War, and they start to think about a union with their enemies just few months, few years ago. You see, this is always possible to create, because people who had these, of course, who had lived such memories are maybe best candidates for making peace. That's why we can think of such a design in the decades to come in 21st century. Thank you for listening. Maybe if you have questions, I can also take some questions.